I'm Sarah Shaffi, and thank you for joining us on this very hot evening. I hope you have a cool drink or some ice cubes nearby. I'm going to introduce our authors in just a moment, but first, just to say that there's going to be time for audience questions at the end, and I'm sure everyone is an expert at this by now, but there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, so please do put your questions in there as you think of them, and we'll try and get through as many as possible. And now to introduce our three authors who will appear in just a moment. First up, we have Faridah Àbíké-íyímídé, who is a writer from South London who dreamt of writing books about Black kids saving or destroying the world all of her life. Her debut novel, Ace of Spades, is an instant New York Times and IndieBound bestseller and a #2 bestseller in the UK. Faridah has also written for Enemy, The Bookseller, Reader's Digest and Galdem, and has just completed her degree at a university in the Scottish Highlands. So hi, Faridah. Next up, we have Holly Jackson, who is the best-selling author of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, the critically acclaimed #1 New York Times best-selling YA crime thriller and winner of the British Book Awards Children's Book of the Year in 2020. And it was also a shortlisted title for the Waterstones Children's Book Prize 2020. The third and final instalment of the series, which is the book that we'll be talking about today, is As Good as Dead, and it's out this summer. Holly lives in London, and aside from reading and writing, she enjoys playing video games and watching true crime documentaries so she can pretend to be a detective. Hi, Holly.
Hiya.
And last but not least, we have Maureen Johnson, who's the #1 New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of several YA novels, including 13 Little Blue Envelopes and Truly Devious. She has also done collaborative works such as Let It Snow with John Green and Lauren Miracle, now on Netflix, and several works in the Shadowhunter universe with Cassandra Clare. Her work has appeared in publications such as the New York Times, BuzzFeed and The Guardian, and she's also served as a scriptwriter for EA Game. She has an MFA in writing from Columbia and lives in New York City, and her new novel is called The Box in the Woods. So hi, Maureen, welcome to all of you, and I hope you're all keeping very well this evening / this afternoon for you, Maureen, is that right?
Yes,
this morning?
It's about 2:30 in the afternoon.
Okay, lovely. Well, let's kick off by getting you all to tell us a little bit about your books. So just for anyone that hasn't had the chance to read them yet, tell us what they're about. So Faridah, do you want to introduce us to Ace of Spades, please?
Sure. So it's Ace of Spades, the Waterstones edition, and it's like Get Out meets Gossip Girl, and it follows Devon and Chiamaka in their final year of high school, when a secret anonymous texter starts to spread all their secrets around the school, and they have to team up before things get deadly.
Sounds good.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, that was really like...
Yeah, I have to admit, I have only read the Wikipedia entry for Get Out because I'm too scared to watch it.
Oh, it's such a great film.
Sorry, I can't do it. Holly, tell us about As Good as Dead, which is the third book in your series. So give us sort of the pitch for the series and tell us what.
I attempt to hold all three in one. Oh, I can do it. Is that the right order?
Do it? Oh yeah, that is the right order.
So, As Good as Dead is the third and final book, thank God, in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, where we meet a very different Pip than she was at the start of the series, and she's kind of struggling with the previous cases that she's solved, and she starts to realize that she might have a stalker, and this time the case that she's going to investigate might actually be about her. And I don't know how to say anything about this book without spoiling, but things get crimey and thrillery, and lots of scary stuff happens, and it's my favorite one of the series, and I'm kind of shocked that they let me do this plot. I thought publishers were going to be like, you know, you can't do that. So I'm happy I've been allowed to do it, and buckle up if you read it. I feel like it's going to be a bit of a Marmite book. Lots of people might hate it, but that's okay.
Oh, that's interesting. Might ask why you think that later, because I don't think it's a Marmite book. I think everyone's going to love it.
Okay, excellent. What does everyone love? Peanut butter? A peanut butter book?
A peanut butter book? I don't know. We'll think about that. Yeah, we'll think about that.
Right.
And Maureen, that's about The Box in the Woods, in which we're again spending time with Stevie, who we met in the Truly Devious books that you've written.
I'm gonna push these books forward here. They're way back near this plan. So this is The Box in the Woods. This is a standalone Stevie Bell mystery. Stevie Bell was introduced in the Truly Devious series, which he solved a cold case from 1936 that involved a kidnapping and a murder, 2 murders actually. And this is a standalone in which she is called upon to solve or help investigate a notorious quadruple murder from 1978 that took place at a camp called Wonder Falls in Massachusetts. And she's called upon by the new owner of the camp, who wants to make a true crime show about the murders and thinks that Stevie will be good publicity. But her arrival in the town and the circumstances of making the show caused some things to happen that the past, from the 1978 past, is not so far in the past. And a lot of bad things are still happening and will happen in the town of Barlow Corners, Massachusetts.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun.
Dun,
Dun, dun, dun. Well, you mentioned true crime there, Maureen, and usually I would ask authors about sort of the general inspirations for your novels, but I want to adjust it slightly for the 3 of you and sort of ask about where you get the inspiration for the crimes or crime that your characters are sort of tasked with investigating or find themselves tied up in. Are they sort of inspired by real life kind of newspaper stories that you've seen, or are they something that you completely make up? And does that then tell us something a little bit about your minds? So Maureen, let's start with you.
Well, the Truly Devious case was a case from the 30s, and that was super loosely based on the kidnapping of the baby of Charles Lindbergh, and some, because it was spooky, like ransom note kind of thing. This is a case from 1978, and it's not based on anything in particular. However, anyone that does anything about true crime, especially United States true crime, will know that the 70s were sort of some really macabre field decade in which terrible things happened all the time, like just apparently serial killers as far as the eye could see. But there were a lot of cases, there were a lot of strange things that, you know, it does seem to be an extraordinary decade for this kind of thing. So it was relatively easy. In fact, people could read this and be like, it's like this case or this case and this case. And the trouble is, it's like all of them, because except this one is pretty, it's its own thing. I mean, it's pretty, the 70s, I guess.
The 70s, yeah. I mean, how sort of, I mean, there are some very famous serial killers from the 70s in America, but how familiar were you with their sort of the stories before writing this book? Did you go away and kind of read up more on the crimes committed in that decade, or did you try and steer clear so that you had sort of quite fresh eyes when you were coming to write?
I'm one of those people. I do like kind of true crime podcast stories, etc. From the time I was a kid. So these stories were kind of always in my head. I didn't really have to look very far. And I do listen to a lot of true crime, and especially true crime that tries to solve cold cases, which a lot of cases from the 70s are being solved now. So I sort of looked, and at the same time didn't have to, and deliberately didn't model this after any particular case.
And Holly, am I right in thinking you're a bit of a true crime sort of podcast and documentary fan as well? So have sort of any of kind of Pip's cases or experiences been inspired, however loosely, by sort of real things you've read or watched, or kind of are they very much plucked from your imagination?
Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of a combination approach. Obviously, like, it's all fictional, but all of them are inspired by true crime. Some, I would say, like the first book is kind of more not like one particular case, but it's almost like each little bit is kind of something that's happened in like a true crime case. And the second book is kind of loosely inspired by two like British criminal cases, which I mean, obviously the book deviates from them, but they kind of like sparked the ideas. And in the third book, I had to do a lot of research about or is that a spoiler? I had to do a lot of research about a certain area of crime, and yeah, there's definitely a real life thing that happened that kind of gave me the idea for like what the crux of the story. So I'd like true crime, I'd say, is my main kind of jumping off point. But then obviously everything gets fictionalized and up to 100. Although saying that, I often think that things that happen in true crime are often a lot more wilder than like any fiction writer can come up with. Like there's certain podcasts where you listen to them and you're like, if I wrote that as a story, everyone would say that's unrealistic. So yeah, definitely true crime inspired, but with a little flavor of holly dribbled on top. Dribbled? I could have used a way nicer verb.
We'll let you have it, don't worry. Blame the heat. Blame the heat. And Faridah, what about you? Your book is slightly different, and I realize it's again quite difficult, like with all of these books, to talk about it without spoiling too much. But there are some, how do I say this? There's sort of a wider book-wide narrative that is sort of a crime-esque, kind of thriller-esque. But then there are also some specific incidents that kind of perhaps have happened before we join the characters at the start of the book. So were you sort of looking at kind of real life things there, or were you sort of actually thinking about that sort of wider arc of the book and then having smaller things feed into that?
Yeah, I think I'm really like inspired by a lot of TV shows, and I realized the other day that House of Anubis inspired me more than I thought it did with Ace of Spades. So like really dark kind of conspiracy theorist type of things are what keep me up at night and make me think of really messed up stories. So yeah, I'm always scrolling through like the TikTok conspiracy talk at like 3 a.m. and scaring myself to sleep because that's the only way I can sleep. So.
Conspiracy talk.
I didn't know there was a conspiracy talk.
It's huge.
I need to fall down the rabbit hole there.
Tell us more about conspiracy talk, because I feel like other people will be interested in this as well. So is it like minute-long videos where people are just, is it kind of well-known things that they're looking at, or is it?
It's everything from like this celebrity's actually alive and here's why, to like conspiracies from the 70s. And I love it so much because some of them I know and I just like to scare myself again. Like the Avril Lavigne case.
Yeah, that's a
and
good
some of them are like weird stuff that like I didn't even think of, and it's like creeped me out so much.
The Avril Lavigne case?
Yes, she's not Avril Lavigne.
Isn't the theory that she has like a clone or like she has a replacement? Yeah.
Yes.
And there's a whole list of evidence that sounds very compelling, I must say.
It is, yeah.
Maureen's like, I've got to go. I've got to do some investigating. See ya. Like,
just who is she if she's not Avril Lavigne?
Exactly.
Melissa, I think that's her name. Yes.
Her name is Melissa.
Yes.
And was there ever an Avril Lavigne?
Yes, but she got tired of the fame and Melissa took over.
Got it.
Maybe.
I feel like Maureen's mind has been blown.
I just didn't know that anyone. I didn't know that. I just didn't know.
Well, since Faridah, you mentioned like conspiracy talk and House of Anubis, I'm curious as to kind of for all of you, what other sort of pop culture moments or sort of TV shows, films, music, etc. you might be inspired by. I mean, Faridah, your book is pitched as Get Out meets Gossip Girl, so I assume those are two things that you love very much.
Yes. So for me, I feel like Gossip Girl was a huge inspiration for the book. Like Devon and Chiamaka are a lot like Blair Waldorf and Dan Humphrey from Gossip Girl, but Get Out as well kind of inspired me, especially the sunken place and like the psychological aspect of it. But I also loved Pretty Little Liars growing up, and I just love really dark teen mystery shows, and like even adult shows like How to Get Away with Murder. So yeah, I'm really inspired by TV. I watch a lot of TV.
Have you watched Pretty Little Liars, Faridah?
Yes.
Yeah, I watched that one, and I would say I guess that one was like kind of like inspiration for me in a way that like the show is like super cheesy and kind of a bit ridiculous, but like I would say it slightly lets down the fans, and it kind of goes off the rails. But what I found really interesting is if you went on like the subreddit for Pretty Little Liars, there would be like people who watch it who have the most amazing theories of like details they've spotted from season 1, and they track it through and they're like, this person is A, and like that. I just found it really cool that like so many people like came up with way better theories than the TV show went with. So I say Pretty Little Liars inspired me in the way to like not let your audience down with your final reveal, but also to like in a way like to encourage that kind of like rabid like theorizing as you're watching it, which I think everyone's books here encourage that, and I think that's the kind of thing that makes mystery thrillers really fun. Like as to like opposed to other genres, that's kind of the special thing about mystery thrillers, is the kind of the theorizing, and it kind of brings out your armchair detective.
I'm definitely going to ask about that more in a second. Maureen, what about you? Are there sort of any pop culture things you really love that you sort of are inspired by or kind of like to nod to? Or
it's a lot of, for me, really classic old mysteries. This is a really straight up puzzle mystery. I grew up reading every mystery novel I could get my hands on, sort of, and many times the older the better. So country houses where people just keep vanishing, or, you know, turning up in the library, or going into the garden and not coming back, or really things like that. Mine are very, very, they're written very much along that model of the classic mystery.
So Holly, on that point you sort of just made, I would love to get you all to speak a little bit about what makes a good thriller for a reader. Like, how do you ensure that the reader feels like the solution, for want of a better word, the solution to kind of the mystery or the crime you're presenting is within their grasp, without making it so obvious that they're kind of like, oh well, I can see this coming, and I'm, you know, from page 50 and I don't need to read the rest. Like, what's that kind of balance? How do you get that balance, and how do you get that kind of, you know, people who are then going away and talking about it and being like, well, this thing happened on page 86, which I think leads in that direction. So Maureen, can you perhaps kick us off with that and kind of how you navigate it?
I think just good building. You just really try to build your, what I try to do is just build the crime very, very carefully. I start with the events, the crime events, and I build outwards. So I really, really hammer that out. I study it. I kind of keep turning the thing around to see if I can see any holes in it. If I can, does it sink when you drop it into water? You know, is it watertight? Does it really hold up? And then you kind of carefully tease out the little clues and things, and you, it's kind of really like a craftsmanship thing. You really just want to gently place strong but thin threads throughout.
There's the quote.
Strong
but thin threads.
Yeah. And Holly, what about you? And if you do a similar thing, sort of how do you kind of plot that crime out, and do you work backwards from the solution and kind of?
Oh yeah, I start with the solution and work back, as Maureen was saying, but I think that it is a really tricky line in kind of mystery based thrillers, that like, because you know that people are reading thrillers and they don't want to get to the end and feel like, I could never have guessed that, that's so annoying, like they're not going to feel satisfied. But also you don't want them to guess it, because then they'll be like, oh, I guessed that on page 50. So it is a thin line that you tread between not wanting them to guess it, but for them to get to the end and be like, oh, I should have got that because of that clue, and kind of pull the rug out under them and make them hate themselves and all their life choices. But it is a tricky line to pull. The way I kind of do it is I extensively plan the crime, and I work out where I'm going to drop the clues. But you almost have to kind of have several other narratives running in your head of like theories you think a reader will go for, like the more obvious ones and the less obvious ones, and try like litter in clues that kind of to serve the main mystery, but also in a way could be seen to serve one of these. So every time I'm writing, I've kind of got these other like ideas in my head of like, I think people are going to think it's this person, this theory. So I can't be too obvious in nudging them towards that, because then they'll say, oh, that's too obvious, I'm not going to think it. It's very complicated. I keep a lot of notes telling myself what to do.
Faridah, you were nodding along there. Tell us a little bit about how you sort of worked with Ace of Spades, and kind of how you sort of what red herrings, if any, whether you planted any red herrings, or kind of what you were looking to kind of drop hints about as the book progresses.
Yeah, so I had to like plan like extensively as well. I think my plan was like 12,000 words, because
Nice.
I just like needed to know every single detail. So I'm so scared of like plot holes. And also I think trying to kind of not trick the reader, but also kind of lead them in the wrong direction while like you're doing your actual story. They're kind of looking for something else. Because I feel like in a lot of mysteries, they kind of tell you who the killer is, or like what the antagonist is in this mystery, like very early on, if you're like aware of what it is in the end. Like it's quite easy to spot eventually, I guess, but like it's there. But because the author is like in a good mystery is leading you astray, that's kind of what I try to do. I just try to trick people into looking the wrong way.
It's all about manipulating them.
I was going to say you're all very devious.
Yeah.
And
Truly devious we are.
truly devious.
I'm off.
I liked how Faridah said, we don't want to trick you. And then in the end, she's like, we trick you. We trick you. That's what
that's what we do. That's our job, is to trick you. We just know we can never trust anything you say in real life. No, I'm sure you don't trick people in real life. It's all for your books. One of the things that I think can sort of be found in all of your novels is ideas around like power and privilege of different sorts, and I wanted you to sort of talk about addressing some of the things that you were trying to address. So Faridah, maybe let's start with you and Ace of Spades. Some of the things that you were trying to address, and why a thriller is sort of the kind of type of book or type of story that really lends itself to you being able to kind of talk about those things.
So I think like in a thriller, especially when you're dealing with characters of color, you can't just drop them into like the real world and like expect things to look the same as a white character, because there are already like preconceived biases that an investigator would have. And so I was like obsessed with Gossip Girl. So I was like, how would it look like if Black students were in these roles, like the mean girl and the kind of loner boy? And I kind of like plan from there. And I think, especially with thrillers, they kind of represent like greater fears in society. And so it's a really good like medium to like explore things that are bigger but in a small way, and kind of critique those or like expose them. But also I think like, especially with Chiamaka and Devon, you kind of see how in like a traditional thriller, these Black characters will be looked at differently. So like automatically people might suspect them of things because of, you know, biases and racism, whereas a white character could be very like not suspected until later and there's like evidence against them. But with a Black or brown character, like a person of color, there's always going to be that bias if we're playing in the real world. So yeah, I think thrillers give you that space to explore those type of things.
And Holly, what about you? Sort of, there are sort of a number of things across your novel, I guess, across the three novels in your trilogy. I guess kind of one of the characters that springs to mind is the character of Max, who has great power and privilege, and sort of, can you talk a little bit? And I realize I should have said this at the beginning, there will probably, but we'll try and avoid it where possible, but there still will probably be spoilers for earlier books from both Holly and Maureen. So
I'll try to say it in a veiled way.
This is your spoiler warning for books 1 and 2 from A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. So
I'll try and tread the line. I'll use some winks. I mean, I guess like the kind of social issue that I was kind of focusing on with these novels quite naturally is the criminal justice system and areas in which it fails certain people or certain marginalized communities, or the way that like crimes that are more commonly committed against women or those who identify as women are kind of how they like go through the justice system, and kind of how justice is, you know, dealt out to people and who finds it easier. And as you brought up the character of Max Hastings, Max Hastings, he's kind of the epitome of like white, like middle class male privilege, and like how life is just easier for him. And the criminal justice system is one of those things that's just, it's far easier for someone like him to game almost, in order to, I don't know how to say this without spoiler, just in order to, you know, like maintain his freedom and non-criminal status. And yeah, a lot of the books kind of explore the criminal justice system and whether in fact the way that it operates currently, and in like particularly with sexual assault cases, you know, the onus kind of being on victims and the way they're kind of grilled, and the fact that rape convictions and sexual assault convictions are so like abysmally low in this country, and like even like people reporting cases is abysmally low, probably because of that knowledge that it's just, you're not likely to find justice. And so it's one of the kind of the running themes through all three books is kind of Pip's realization. Like she kind of starts the first book with kind of rose tinted glasses of like, all that matters is the truth, and like the truth will out. And she kind of starts to learn that that's quite a naive position to have, and the truth doesn't necessarily mean that justice will be done, and what does good and bad mean when it's applied to the real world type thing. Lots of moral grey area.
But I guess that exploration and of kind of the criminal justice system is something that's done by the nature of the genre in quite a lot of thrillers that feature amateur detectives, because they are often investigating something, and Maureen, perhaps you can pick up on this as well a little bit. They are often investigating something which has been forgotten or ignored for whatever reason, and so they are required to get involved. So tell us, Maureen, a little bit about Stevie and kind of, and the sort of world she finds herself in. There's, you know, in this new book, there's the person that you mentioned earlier, the kind of the guy, this tech guy that sort of wants to create this podcast, is incredibly rich and privileged, and that sort of affords him some things. And you know, two of the victims of the crime were women, and one was a very privileged man. So talk a little bit about some of the things that you're exploring in this book.
Well, I think that at their heart, mysteries and thrillers are about what happened that we ended up here? How did these events come to be? And did they come to be in the way that we think they did? Were we told the truth? Historically, have we been, who writes the history of what happened? And we're certainly at a point in time when we're going, hey, that history as it's been taught isn't accurate. That isn't really, you know, we're not really looking at this very clearly. And in the case of the box in the woods, a number of kids so these 4 teenagers were killed, and things happened in the past that were what Stevie, I'm dancing between the raindrops a little bit here, with trying not to spoil anything, but Stevie learns that some things happened in this town in the past that were not explored by the powers that be, that there were some injustices in the past. And the person that she teams up with in the present, who wants to make this true crime show, has absolutely no regard for, you know, the families, the victims, the people that are still left behind. He's just like, this is all entertainment. And Stevie is the one that steps forward, which is hard for her because she is A, 17, and B, pretty anxious, you know, to say like, hey, actually, the people right now do matter. And that is something I also like about modern true crime, is it's a refocusing on like, hey, why don't we talk more about the victims and their families and what they actually deserve? So it's a sort of roundabout answer, largely because I'm trying not to spoil.
Don't worry about it. I mean, you mentioned the past there, and sort of the past, whether it be kind of actions, thoughts, relationships, or cases, comes back to haunt all of your characters in one way or another. And Maureen, I think towards the beginning of The Box in the Woods, you write that the past was not in the past for them. The emotions current was alive and well, and the questions still lingered in the air. So I wanted, and Maureen, you sort of touched on this, so maybe Holly, let's go to you first. Talk a little bit about this idea of the past infusing the present, particularly with regards to kind of, you know, when you're putting together a thriller.
Yeah. Well, for me, I didn't know I was doing a series when I first wrote the book. I thought it was going to be a standalone. But once I did know I was doing a series, I went into it knowing that I wanted, though it may be kind of like a self-contained mystery in each book, like ish. So, I mean, in theory, you could pick up the second book. You probably wouldn't know what's going on, but like, it has its own like satisfying conclusion. But I wanted the entire series to like tell one kind of writhing, interconnected story. So in that sense, the past, be it the past of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, like completely informs the next two books. And actually, like, I went back, because I didn't plan to do a series, I went back to any like holes or gaps I'd left or anything, and clues, and I kind of filled it back in. So there are clues in the first book for what happens in the second book, kind of like a major clue there, and for the third book as well, there's like huge bits of information in the first book that inform the rest of the story. So in that way, the plot of As Good as Dead is very much informed by the books that came before, but also in kind of Pip's characterization, because referencing, say, Pretty Little Liars again, with some media where you have kind of like the teen detective character, I feel like they go through some like horrific things, and then they're kind of back next season like, okay, let's go do it. And it doesn't feel very realistic that these like young people who've been through trauma or just seen like the worst that humanity has to offer would just be like, have a spring in their step the next month and just be over it. It doesn't feel realistic. And I always wanted to try and, you know, keep this like gritty, realistic, as it was inspired by true crime. So Pip, we find Pip in As Good as Dead, and she is really troubled by the kind of the end of Good Girl Bad Blood. Like she's not okay, and she's not coping very well, and that does kind of inform her decisions therefore going forward in the plot. But I feel like it would have been just a bit too like everything is sunny and blah 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 if she wasn't traumatized by what she'd been through.
I tell you what, TV show does do the opposite to Pretty Little Lies is Veronica Mars, if you've ever seen
Oh, I've never watched it, although everyone keeps telling me to.
It is
really
very
good
on kind of people that are haunted by the things they've seen. Faridah, talk to us a little bit about sort of the past infusing the present for Devon, but I guess particularly for Chiamaka, who there are sort of some literal flashbacks kind of that begin to haunt her, or that have haunted her since those incidents have happened, but have now kind of come back in a very real way. So tell us a little bit about weaving those narratives into the present day narrative of the book.
Yeah, so I feel like with the characters, a lot of their kind of current like behaviors are informed by things they've experienced in the past. I'm trying not to give any spoilers, but like I just thought it'd be interesting if they had like skeletons in their closet, and like it was like hinted at constantly. I just always find it interesting when this mystery is also the character themselves. But also real life history also influences a lot of things in the book, like from the past, and like real life incidences of injustices happening, or like just historical figures and stuff, and like historical events, and so there's a lot of history and like past affecting future in the general plot, but also within the characters themselves.
Lovely. And Maureen, with The Box in the Woods, you sort of most of the story takes place kind of in the present day with Stevie, but there are kind of a fair number of sections where you go back to the 70s, you begin with the day with the crime was committed. Were you always planning to do that with this book? Or did you always sort of want to go back and forth?
Yeah, it was always. It was written in the same style as Truly Devious, which goes back to the 30s. I love a crime flashback. I want to see it. I want to be on the ground and looking around. I feel like that's important. It gives the reader the fairest shot at looking at the evidence themselves. So it's your chance to be there, look around with those eyes. A lot of the clues are there for you to go through. It's the source material for the reader to go through.
Do you write those sections as almost a separate story, or do you sort of write chronologically as through the book and kind of chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4?
They're written as a little bit, they're written kind of as a separate thing. Their positions are already kind of slotted in. Sometimes I move them a little bit. Like I'm like, this number 3 I thought it was going to be after chapter 4, but it's actually going to be after chapter 5. But they're always, and they're almost always front loaded into the book because you need as much information in the beginning. And then you get usually another one at the end where you can see, and here's what happened. Like, here's the stuff you haven't seen in the beginning.
We're going to go to audience questions in a bit. We've had quite a few come in, but if anybody else has any more, please do put them in. Let's do a little quick fire round on summer and mostly reading. So you'll all answer all of these questions, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but just kind of first answer at the top of your heads. Just go for it. So what book do you associate most with summer? And it doesn't have to be a book set during summer. It can be one you read in the summer holidays when you were younger. It can be something you took away on holiday. So Faridah, let's start with you.
The Heartstopper graphic novels. They're very light and like fun and lovely.
Wonderful. Maureen?
It's going to be an older mystery, like a Dorothy L. Sayers or something like that.
Nice. And Holly?
Mine's a rogue choice. Maybe because I read it when I was traveling during summer one time, but It by Stephen King. I feel like that takes place in summer. It feels summery.
I feel there's a whole discussion to be had about like how we consume the darkest of crime and thrillers in the like hottest and lightest of days, but that's a separate thing.
And also the holidays for some reason.
Yeah. Love a murder mystery at Christmas. Where's your favorite place to read in summer? So Maureen, we'll start with you.
Outside, which I don't get to that much of reading outside, but if I get to go and sit on a beach, please, or like a chair outside, anything that swings, you'll never get me out of it.
Lovely. Holly?
I feel like there is something special about reading outside, although I'd like, if we're going back to like the olden days where we could go on holiday and like sit by a pool, I don't know, I get really annoyed because like the sun would melt your glue and then the pages start blowing away. I've had that happen a few times, so I feel like slightly less hot, maybe like a garden is the perfect place to read.
And Faridah?
Maybe a bookshop or a coffee shop.
Okay, nice. Tell us about one book that is on your summer reading list this year. So Holly, we'll start with you for this one.
I'm going to cheat and tell you the book I just read, which was Survive the Night by Riley Sager, which I think is out in America. I don't know if it's out. I don't even know when my own books are out. I don't know when his are. But no, it was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. It's set in the 90s, but it's very like kind of like your true crime inspired, you could feel, and it kind of takes place all over one night, and it was really good.
Okay, Faridah, what about you? One book on your summer reading list?
As Good as Dead, actually. I started reading it during my dissertation or like around that time period, and I had to stop because I was going to fail if I continued, so I'm going to finish that.
Oh no, you're going to hate it. It's a Marmite book.
No.
And Maureen, what about you?
I was just rereading The Daughter of Time by Josephine Tay, which is about a man trying to solve the murder of the princes in the tower.
Ooh.
Oh, as in like, was that like old royal families?
Yeah, but except it doesn't take place in the past. It's about a man who is stuck in bed because he had an injury, and a police detective book is from the 30s or 40s. So he spends all of the time of his convalescence trying to solve the mystery of the princes in the tower.
So let's pretend if there wasn't a pandemic on and everyone was going like away in the summer, do you tend to pack too many or too few books in your suitcase, Faridah?
Too many. I'm currently in Scotland and I brought like 20 books for no reason. And I'm only here for a week and I haven't read any of them.
I love it. I love it.
Are they all physical books or are some of them e-books?
Physical.
How many suitcases did you pack?
2.
This is my
book. Maureen, what about you? Are too few or too many books packer?
Well, if they're ebooks, you can have as many. That's what I do. I just fill the e-reader. But also the trick is, I guess not tomorrow, but then on Saturday, I'm going for our first and only trip away to our friend's house, which is Cassie Claire's house, and she has her own library, so I don't have to bring any.
Why?
Because I'm going to stay in her library and I can just grab things off the shelf. That's the trick. Steal your friend's books.
I love it. And Holly?
I'm a hybrid. I take too many, but not like on the scale of Faridah. Calm down. But like then I also will have a Kindle as well. So I'll do Kindle and then a few physical books as well because I know they'll get melted.
Okay, lovely. I do have a few more, but we have so many questions, so I'm gonna see how many of these we can get through. So Megan says she loves all your books so much. What tips would you give to someone who wants to write a murder mystery YA but isn't sure where to start? And let's go for like one quick tip from each of you. So Faridah.
Watch How to Get Away with Murder and take notes on that.
It is a great show.
Holly?
Well, I know every writer is different, but I feel like if you're writing murder mysteries, be a planner. I feel like it will just save you a lot of heartache if you're a planner.
Okay, and Maureen?
I was about to say planning.
Okay, lovely.
Top tip, and
plan. Holly, this is one for you. Cynthia says, after As Good as Dead, do you plan on starting any new series? Even though you've already told us that As Good as Dead, that this wasn't meant to be a series.
It wasn't supposed to be a series. They forced me to do it. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but I think my next couple of books are going to be standalones, and touch wood, they will stay as standalones because writing a series is hard work. Although actually, so is writing standalones. Writing is hard. Full stop. I forgot what the question was.
So this is a question. It's just disappeared. So from Emma and Joyce, who say, what would you say to teenage girls who love mystery novels but aren't considered the most popular?
The girls aren't considered the most popular.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Popularity, schmopularity. You'll know how to kill those people, and hide their bodies. So.
Please don't kill anybody. I must add that that is simply the view of Holly and none of the other panelists.
Not representative of Waterstones.
Or Waterstones, yeah. Faridah or Maureen, do you want to add anything there?
I genuinely was dumbfounded because I'm like, what is popularity?
We're all book geeks together. A question for Faridah from Evie. I think I know the answer to this. Who is your favourite Gossip Girl character? And Evie loves Blair.
Yes, Blair. She's amazing.
Blair reigns supreme. I think we can all agree. One for Maureen from Emma. Did you know that you were going to stay in the same universe for sequels, etc.? And did you know, I guess specifically for the Box in the Woods, that you wanted to write another book that featured Stevie?
I did, because I my specific subgenre of mystery that I like the most is the detective mystery, which means that I have my detective and I get to follow them on multiple cases. So I made a detective, and then I always knew that she would go on other cases.
Yeah, brilliant. Catherine wants to know from all of you, how has the pandemic shaped your writing or your approach to writing? And in particular, how is it writing thrillers and mysteries in what is already a really intense period of time? So Faridah, do you want to kick us off with that?
I don't think it's changed much for me because I'm mostly always at home anyway. I think it's made me just more anxious as I'm writing because just generally it's like not great to be anxious while you're writing and also anxious about the world. So yeah.
Maureen?
Sometimes it was hard to get anything done. And then sometimes it was easy to get lots of things done because there was nowhere to go, nowhere to be, no one to see.
Yeah, and Holly, what about you?
Exactly as the others said, but also, yeah, it hasn't really changed my life that much, to be fair, because I am just at home all the time writing. But although it is interesting because I think possibly with the others as well, in like this current book and like future books, I pretend COVID doesn't happen because it would really mess up my plot. Like no one's allowed to go anywhere and masks would just get in the way. So technically we're probably all sci-fi writers now because our books take place in alternate universes where COVID never existed.
It's okay. I don't think many of us are ready to read about COVID in our fiction right now anyway.
And it literally ruins all like murder mystery plots. Like,
yeah.
You have to stay inside.
A great question here from Grace. What is the best biscuit or cookie for writing? If you are, and if you're not a biscuit or cookie person, what is the best like confectionery or sweet? So Holly, you start with this one.
I feel like in times of stress when the deadline is looming, I can polish off so many Maryland cookies, you have no idea. And it is specifically just those. I can go through like 2 packs and then I always feel really ashamed of myself afterwards, but also very pleased.
I'm impressed. You shouldn't be ashamed at all.
It's literally just Maryland cookies. Like if there's a tournament ever, like an Olympics for eating a specific type of cookie.
Yeah, you've got it in the bag. Brilliant.
It's coming home.
Maureen, what about you? What sustains you while you're writing?
Given the choice, if I got to go out to go somewhere, I get a biscotti for a couple of reasons. One, you can balance it neatly on the top of your mug if you don't have anywhere to put it down. It holds up a long time because you have to work at those things because usually, so you can't just chomp it down. It gives you a couple seconds and it's a good shape to hold. Like you have to shove it in your pocket but the top of the mug thing I think is very handy.
Brilliant. And Faridah, what about you?
I mostly just drink tea, but if I have like anything, it's usually like the Reese's cups. And yeah, that's not really a biscuit or cookie, but
I said I extended it out to sweets and chocolates as well, so that's all good. Gabby says, do you have any favorite thriller tropes at all? So Maureen, let's start with you on that.
Anything that's the house, the island, I love everybody in a house. Love everybody in a house.
I assume you've read Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which it has both a house on an island. So perfect.
The original island.
Yeah. Faridah, what about you? Are there any tropes that you love in thrillers?
I love when people come back from the dead, and also love when there's like a secret society involved.
Love a secret society. Holly?
I'm trying to think of any tropes. I guess that one I really like in reading and like I try to do in writing is when you're able to leave like every chapter on like a slight cliffhanger, so it has that kind of like, oh, I'm gonna have to read the next chapter now, and you kind of have to do it angrily because you're like, oh, I wanted to go to bed, right, next chapter. I don't know if that's a trope, but I dig it.
We'll take it. Rebecca wants to know who was the most difficult character for each of you to write and who was the most fun. So Faridah, let's start with you on that one.
I think the most difficult character was probably my main characters. I had to like get to know them intimately, and I'm very different from them, so I found them frustrating sometimes because they make decisions I wouldn't make. But also, fun character to write was the cat in my book called Bullshit. Very fun character, very sassy.
Brilliant.
And not a lot of dialogue.
Exactly.
Maureen, what about you?
Maybe one of the more difficult is David, who is the son of I can't say who he's the son of. His name is David. He's got problems. The most fun is definitely the character of Nate, who is a teenage author who wrote a book once and accidentally got kind of famous for writing this book, and now he has to write a second book. And every time you ask him if he's writing, he freaks out and runs away, and always thinks people are persecuting him if they ask if he's written anything or how the book is going. And he's this constantly tormented soul who's always running away from people asking him how his book is going. I'm not saying
you're not saying that's like you or any other author, but maybe you're not saying that either.
I'm not saying it.
Nor deny.
And Holly, what about you? What most difficult character?
I'd say the most difficult, just because she is the main character, is Pip, because we don't see anything in the book that she doesn't experience. She's the only perspective character, so you somehow have to sustain a story, but only bits that she has access to, and you have to go quite deep into the old psyche. And then I'd say my favorite is Ravi, because obviously we never see him on his own, only with Pip, but he brings some good levity to scenes of which otherwise would be miserable because of Pip's big misery guts. But he's really fun, and I just really like writing them together. It's fun, and trying to think of like the most inappropriate things they can say to each other, like at the most inappropriate crimey time. That's the bit that sustains me.
They're like the Jake and Amy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
Or like the Jake and Amy / Rosa, who's a bit more morbid. But
yeah, it's a hybrid.
Erin wants to know, what was the first case that got you interested in true crime, for our sort of true crime aficionados on the panel? Maureen?
I mean, probably when I was a kid, the Manson case, because that's the original. It's cults plus murder plus what just happened. There didn't seem to be any reason behind. I also love to read about a cult. Love it. We'll do it all day long, every day. That was probably the first one.
Okay, amazing. Cults and con artists, I think they're things that we all love to read about, right? Faridah, what about you?
For me, it was the Madeleine Mccann case, because I remember I was like 7 or 8, and like I didn't know people could go missing, and they seemed so worried on the TV. So I was like, I'm gonna stay up and solve this for them. Sadly, I didn't, but I really got interested in like just the weird things that can happen in the world, and like the people that like are victims and their families.
Okay. And Holly, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think kind of the Madeleine McCann case was kind of a big like loss of innocence moment for a lot of people in the UK. It's the first time you kind of realise that bad things could happen and could happen to children. I don't know if any like other standout cases other than that, but I will say that the thing that kind of inspired my like true crime fetish, that's not an appropriate word, true crime obsession, like recently as an adult, was the Adnan Syed case covered in Serial, which, I mean, I was a bit late. Everyone else had got obsessed with it, and I was a few months later. I was like, what's this everyone going on about? Let me listen. And I just I got the bug from that moment. I loved the way that podcasts are just amateur detectives, and they use kind of like tools that we have accessible to us to try and like revisit and see whether justice has been served or not. And I think that was
and get them solved.
Yeah, potentially solve them.
Brilliant. Orly wants to know from all of you, how did you pick the names of your characters? So Faridah, let's start with you. Not all of your characters, obviously. Let's list let's go with your protagonists. So
So Chiamaka's name is like, it's like a Nigerian name, but specifically it's so the tribes in Nigeria. Her mum is Igbo and Yoruba, and I'm obsessed with Igbo first names. And I was like, why not make her, someone that's both Igbo and Yoruba? I'm Yoruba. And Devon, I just like the name. So really, I just like the sound of names, and I'm like, I'll just stick that on a character.
Brilliant. Maureen, what about you?
Honestly, there's no real special thing that I do. I just kind of try out some names and see which one seems to sound right. Boring answer, but that's how I do it.
And Holly, what about you?
I feel like mine's a bit of a boring answer. I can't even remember why I called her that. I feel like it's because I was trying to come up with the most like annoying, like perky name for like my teen detective. And what is more annoying than Pip? Sorry to all Pips and Pippers. It just sounds like, oh, I'm Pip. Tell me what you were on Thursday night last week. That was the vibe I was going for.
I love it. Iona wants to know, do you think all of your characters would get along if they met?
Oh, I don't know. Everyone hates Pip. She's annoying. How can everyone like Ravi? No one could dislike Ravi. He'd probably be buddies with everyone.
Okay. Faridah?
Yeah, I mean, do you mean like if our characters met each other?
Yeah.
Crossover events. Like Marvel.
Yeah.
I don't think Chiamaka likes anyone, so I think it would be very unlikely. But yeah, I think Devon would get along with everyone. So yeah, just Chiamaka hates everyone. Devon loves people.
And Maureen, what about you?
Stevie would be frightened of like meeting everybody because she would be worried that they wouldn't like her or that she sounded stupid. But eventually she would come out and just start talking about stuff. And in the end, she would forget that she was worried in the first place.
But they would all bond as they solve a new murder.
Yeah,
Holly is determined to write a crossover with you now. Right?
Once they started talking about that, everything would be fine.
Yeah. It's the best icebreaker, isn't it?
Yeah, they'd be fine after that.
It's like when the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew teamed up, but like with your characters. Ellie wants to know, who do you relate most to in your book? So Holly, let's start with you.
I guess I kind of feel like with a lot of characters, they kind of have little bits of you in them, like certain parts of your personality or experience kind of feed into a lot of characters. Maybe not the most evil, but or maybe, but I feel like I'm quite different from Pip though, but I feel like she is like what I could attain if I wasn't so lazy, because she's very motivated. So I feel like it was a little bit of like living through her, like, oh, if I could just stop playing PlayStation and go out, could I solve a murder? So yeah, I feel like she has certain bits of me, like, and all the characters do, but no one is like the whole package, because it would be a really boring book, essentially. Just me playing PlayStation, eating Maryland cookies. Wait, that's not boring. That is thrilling.
Faridah?
For me, I feel like it's kind of similar. There's like bits of myself in Devon and Chiamaka. Like with Chiamaka, I think I was very intense as a teenager. I really wanted to like do very well and like achieve so many things, but I wasn't a mean girl. I was just kind of like Devon, kind of like a loner, but I had friends, but I call myself a loner. So yeah, I think I'll kind of relate to them in different ways.
And Maureen, what about you?
I'm none of them, and yet I guess whenever we make somebody, we give them a couple drops of our blood. You know,
a dribble. A little dribble.
They get a little dribble. They get a couple drops of our blood.
I'm banning Holly from saying the word dribble.
Such a horrible word. It's like moist. Dribble, moist.
So on that note, I mean, that is all we've got time for, and there are still so many questions in the Q&A box, so I'm really sorry that we couldn't get through all of them, but thank you so much to everybody that asked such wonderful questions. And on your behalf, I'm going to thank Faridah, Holly and Maureen for their time tonight. So thank you very much to all of you, and
Thank you everyone.
Goodbye from us.
Bye. Thank you. Goodbye.